Philip, welcome to Risk Minds International. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
What are the key conversations that you've been having this week so far, and what's top of the agenda, if you like?
Top of the agenda for me and sort of my clients at the moment is the topic of climate change. I see it's moving a lot of our client base. They see it surfacing as a key theme in the market. Question is, how am I positioned? What risks do I have? What do I need to be doing? Who else is doing it? How do I answer some of the questions coming out of the sort of regulatory investor earnings calls, etc., etc.
It's an incredibly complex issue. How do banks and institutions even begin to sort of put structures in place to cope with what might happen?
Exactly. That's one of the key challenges. We're frequently asked, what's the framework? What's the grammar? How do we approach this question really? And I think there are ways to tackle it. There are sort of approaches that can be used to think about climate change. You think about sort of how it fits into a broader ESG framework, about the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, and then sort of some of the more recent frameworks, things like TCFD, the Principles for Responsible Banking coming out of that. So really sort of addressing key areas such as governance, strategy, the risk management aspect of it, and also sort of targets and KPIs is quite important.
And what is motivating that move by companies? Is it that they see regulation and legislation on the horizon, or is it that there is a genuine conviction behind these ESG sort of...
So as a risk consultant, we like to think that regulation is the key driver. I was heavily corrected on that assumption. So if climate is an interesting angle because it combines there's a huge opportunity that people are asking about. We hear numbers being quoted, 1 trillion additional investment. We hear enormous growth in green bond markets and ESG investments. People are asking on the one hand side, should I be capturing some of these opportunities? How do I get a slice of the pie? So that's one part of the motivation. Second part of the motivation is risks. Yes, we have numerous studies which show enormous risks coming out of climate change. If you think about it fundamentally, sort of power generation, transport will be affected by climate change. It will impact debtors' ability to service their debt. So the question is, how much will it impact my bank? And then, yes, regulation is an aspect of it as well. Although I would say at this stage probably not as sharp as some of the other angles. I think sort of an angle which I hear from my client base that drives more appetite for thinking about it is really questions coming from boards of directors, questions coming from investors, questions coming from sort of daughter companies, subsidiaries, other geographies, where people already say, what am I doing on this? Some are also sort of questioned as panelists in conferences to really take a stance.
Are you surprised by how quickly that shift has happened? Because we've talked about ESG for a good 5 years. It's been on the agenda, but suddenly it's front and centre. That change has been quite rapid. And do you expect to see that continue into the 2020s?
So there's certainly been a dramatic uptick in dynamic and that we can observe over the last 2 years. And you're right in saying sort of ESG and green bonds, for example, are in the asset management space, wealth management space are a little bit more mature than some of the other areas. But I do expect that uptake to continue. You can already see sort of things like the Network for Greening Financial Services, where some of the regulators are working together and collaborating on the climate change topic, where you will see sort of the PRA has already sort of published on it as a forethinker. BaFin is now following in Germany. Some of the other central banks are likely to follow as well. So I do think that the momentum will continue. And I do think that banks are well advised to sort of think about what their coherent response is. And that by no means implies that everybody has to become a green champion, right? There might well be a positioning where you say, look, we think climate change is important, but there's also a value in supporting clients that are in dying industries or sort of in high carbon industries, and thinking about how one can have a coherent answer to that.
So if this audience were to take away one message from you this week at Risk Minds International, what would you hope that would be that they'd be taking back to their boardrooms?
One message, climate change is important. It doesn't have to be a political debate. It should be a very factual debate. It's a strategic discussion about your portfolio. It's not a non-financial disclosure two-page exercise in the back of your report, but it's broader than that. You'd be well advised to have a sort of a coherent answer to those questions.
Philipp, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us today. Great to talk to you.
Thank you very much, Emma. It was a pleasure.